Have you ever heard of a vertical patrol?
A vertical patrol.
Yeah, like a police tactic,
Oh, yeah.
where officers, uh, they'll start at the roof of a building and they work their way down floor by floor, searching each one.
Oh, wow.
You imagine the tension,
Oh, yeah.
enclosed concrete stairwells, poor radio reception, limited visibility.
Yeah.
It's a recipe for disaster, especially in high crime areas.
Right.
And sadly, this is exactly how Officer Tony McClean, a decorated housing police officer back in 1988 Brooklyn.
1988.
Yeah, he lost his life.
Oh, wow.
And we're using an episode of the podcast Anatomy of Murder as our guide today.
Okay.
And it's packed with firsthand accounts from people who were actually there.
Yeah. That's got to be pretty intense
Yeah.
to hear those stories.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
So what strikes me is that this case isn't just about a murder.
Right.
It's a stark reminder of the dangers officers faced, especially during the peak of the crack epidemic in New York City.
Yeah, especially back then. I mean, the housing projects were a different world
Totally.
back then.
So let's dive into the events of that fateful night.
Okay.
So Officer McClean and his partner were conducting a vertical patrol,
Mm-hmm.
searching for a missing 10-year-old girl.
Oh, wow.
They weren't even responding to a crime, which makes the tragedy even more poignant.
It's terrible.
Yeah.
It's important to remember that, housing police often operated in these challenging environments. They faced unique risks different from, say, the NYPD out on the streets.
Right. And this case really highlights that pressure cooker atmosphere of that era.
Oh, yeah.
Officer McClean crossed paths with Johnny Ray Robinson.
Okay.
He was a figure who was deeply embedded in the drug trade and out on parole.
Oh, wow.
Can you imagine the weight of his past bearing down on him in that moment?
Yeah.
Like one wrong move and he's back behind bars.
Yeah, just think about the psychology of someone caught in that cycle. Like the
Yeah.
desperation, the fear of losing everything they fought for it can lead to some impulsive, even violent decisions.
It's chilling. And that encounter in the stairwell, it wasn't a planned confrontation. It was a chance meeting fueled by panic.
Yeah.
Robinson carrying a firearm, he reacted instinctively.
Right.
And it really speaks to the volatility of
Yeah.
those involved in the drug trade.
Right.
They're operating in a world where survival trumps rational thinking.
Absolutely.
Now, the podcast includes this gut-wrenching detail about Officer McClean's death.
Okay.
He was wearing his bulletproof vest,
Okay.
but the bullet found a tiny gap
Oh,
where
no.
the panels connected.
Oh, wow.
Just a sliver of bad luck with fatal consequences.
It's just a reminder that even with the best equipment, fate can play a cruel hand
Absolutely.
sometimes.
So the aftermath of the shooting is pure chaos.
Chaos.
Multiple people fleeing the scene, everyone a potential suspect, everyone a potential witness.
Yeah.
The murder weapon, a 9mm Taurus, semi-automatic, was found in the incinerator shaft.
Okay.
But it wasn't just tossed in there.
Oh, yeah.
It's the details that speak volumes. The serial number was meticulously obliterated. Not a rush job,
Mm-hmm.
but a deliberate act to hinder the investigation.
So it indicates some premeditation,
Yeah.
a level of criminal sophistication.
Wow.
Adds another layer to the story.
It's like a breadcrumb trail leading us deeper into this criminal underworld.
Exactly. And it's this trail that leads us to two key figures,
Okay.
Charles Gary and Kevin Lowry, both present in the lobby moments before the shooting.
But their accounts are anything but straightforward.
No, right. Both were entangled in the drug trade, their stories shrouded in self-preservation and potential deals with the police.
Right.
And the podcast really digs into these murky waters
Yeah.
of witness testimony.
Especially when those involved have their own agendas.
Absolutely.
So Gary initially claims he saw Robinson holding Lowry at gunpoint demanding money.
Okay.
But was it a genuine observation?
Right.
Or a carefully constructed narrative designed to protect himself?
That's the million-dollar question. And the investigation had to navigate this web of potential lies and half-truths,
Yeah.
sifting through the layers to get to the core of what really happened.
And this is where a parallel investigation
Ah.
into a large drug organization unexpectedly intersects with Officer McClean's murder.
Oh, wow.
What? Talk about a twist.
That's a crazy twist.
Okay.
It's a prime example of how seemingly unrelated cases can suddenly converge, revealing hidden connections and shedding new light on old mysteries.
A man named Kyle Patterson, caught up in this drug ring,
Okay.
offers to cooperate.
All right.
He claims to have purchased 6 identical Taurus 9mm guns,
Okay.
distributing them to key members, including, you guessed it,
Wow.
Johnny Ray Robinson.
Okay.
And it's not just a confession. Patterson led the police to his girlfriend's house where he had stashed his own gun.
Oh,
An
wow.
exact match to the murder weapon right down to the obliterated serial number.
So they got him.
Wow. So suddenly the seemingly untraceable gun is linked directly to Robinson.
Yeah.
Thanks to this unexpected informant.
Wow.
Did Patterson's testimony offer any insights into Robinson's possible motive?
Well, he claimed that seeing Officer McClean triggered this wave of panic in Robinson. The fear of being caught with a gun while on parole,
Right.
the potential of returning to prison. It was a potent cocktail of emotions
Yeah.
that could have easily sparked a violent reaction.
But while this new evidence strengthens the case against Robinson, the prosecution is still heavily reliant on the shaky testimonies of Gary and Lowry.
Oh boy. And that's where things get even more complicated as the case heads to trial.
Uh-oh.
The courtroom becomes a battleground where truth and justice are fiercely contested.
This deep dive is already so gripping, and we've only just scratched the surface.
Yeah.
Let's move on to part 2 and see how this high-stakes legal drama unfolds.
Let's do it.
So the trial of Johnny Ray Robinson for the murder of Officer Tony McClean.
Yeah.
It sounds like something ripped from a legal thriller.
Oh, yeah.
I can only imagine the tension in that courtroom,
Right.
especially given the shaky nature of the witnesses.
Yeah, the prosecution was walking a tightrope,
Yeah,
relying heavily on Gary and Lowry.
right.
But knowing that the defense would exploit their connections to the drug trade,
Mm-hmm.
it's a classic dilemma,
Yeah.
seeking justice,
Right.
while relying on individuals with questionable motives.
So how did they attempt to build a convincing case amidst all this uncertainty?
Well, they started by focusing on the night of the shooting,
Okay.
trying to establish a clear timeline.
Mm-hmm.
Gary, despite his inconsistencies,
Right.
was their primary witness.
Okay.
He placed Robinson at the scene with the gun,
Right.
creating a visual for the jury.
But the defense, I imagine, didn't just sit back and accept that narrative.
Absolutely not. They relentlessly attacked Gary's credibility,
Right.
portraying him as someone willing to say anything to save himself.
Mm-hmm.
They highlighted inconsistencies in his statements,
Right.
suggesting he tailored his story to please the police.
Did they bring up the police misconduct allegations that Gary had made?
They did. Gary claimed that a detective had stepped on his handcuffs
Oh, wow.
while pressuring him for a confession.
Mm-hmm.
This injected another layer of complexity into the trial,
Yeah.
forcing the jury to consider the possibility of police coercion.
Wow, so it's not just about determining Robinson's guilt.
Right.
It's about questioning the integrity of the investigation itself.
Exactly.
How did the prosecution handle that bombshell?
They had to address it head on.
Yeah.
The prosecutor acknowledged the seriousness of the accusations,
Okay.
emphasizing that they had no prior knowledge of any misconduct.
Mm.
They left it to the jury to weigh the validity of Gary's claims,
Okay.
while urging them to focus on the evidence pointing to Robinson.
That must have been a delicate balancing act, trying to uphold the investigation's integrity while acknowledging the potential for misconduct.
It was, and just when it seemed like things couldn't get more complicated,
Oh.
Kevin Lowry takes the stand.
Right.
Remember, he had initially corroborated Gary's story?
Yeah.
But then in a dramatic turn of events,
He completely changed his testimony.
he recanted his previous statements.
He now claimed that he and Robinson had fled the building together,
Wow.
creating an alibi for Robinson.
So what could the prosecution possibly do at that point?
Right.
Their own witness had just sabotaged their entire narrative.
They had to make a bold move.
Okay.
Using a provision of New York law,
Mm-hmm.
they were permitted to impeach their own witness.
Wow.
This allowed them to confront Lowry with his prior inconsistent statements,
Okay.
essentially calling him a liar in front of the jury.
It's a risky tactic, but I can see why they felt it was necessary. At least
Yeah.
the jury got a clear picture of Lowry's shifting story.
Right. It was a high-stakes gamble, and it fell to the judge
Yeah.
to guide the jury through this tangled web of testimony.
Right.
He instructed them that Lowry's prior statements couldn't be considered as evidence of Robinson's guilt,
Okay.
but could be used to assess Lowry's credibility.
Mm.
So the jury is left with two unreliable witnesses, accusations of police misconduct, and a case that seems to be crumbling before their eyes.
Yeah.
It's a wonder they were able to reach a verdict at all.
But amidst all the chaos and uncertainty, there was one element the prosecution kept returning:
Hmm.
Robinson's girlfriend.
Right.
Her testimony added a whole new dimension to the case.
Right. She was pregnant with Robinson's child at the time of the murder.
Yeah, and she's the one who revealed the existence of the hit list.
Right.
Exactly. Her testimony painted this chilling picture of Robinson's attempts to silence witnesses.
Yeah.
She described how he dictated this list of names, including Gary and Lowry,
Wow.
along with personal details about their families,
Okay.
instructing her to pass it on to his enforcer.
And this wasn't just hearsay. They actually found the list, right?
They did. The police searched the enforcer's apartment and recovered the list,
Wow.
directly linking Robinson to witness intimidation.
So despite the unreliable witnesses, the questions surrounding police conduct, the prosecution was able to present a pretty compelling narrative,
Right.
woven together by forensic evidence motive and Robinson's own actions to silence those who could incriminate him.
They argued that Robinson's desperation to avoid returning to prison,
Right?
combined with his blatant attempts to obstruct justice,
Yeah.
revealed a consciousness of guilt.
Mm-hmm.
It was a strategy that ultimately proved successful.
The jury, after deliberating, returned with a verdict guilty of first-degree murder.
Wow.
It sounds like a victory for justice,
Yeah.
but I imagine the cost was heavy.
Absolutely. This case wasn't just about legal maneuvering. It was about real people whose lives were irrevocably changed.
Yeah, the emotional impact of Officer McClean's death on his family and friends is immeasurable.
Right.
And then there's his girlfriend caught in this web of loyalty and fear, ultimately choosing to do the right thing despite the risks.
It's a reminder that behind the legal arguments, the evidence, and the courtroom drama, there are human stories of lost courage and the complex choices we make when faced with unimaginable circumstances.
You know, as we delve deeper into this case,
Yeah.
I keep coming back to Officer Tony McClean, the man behind the badge.
Yeah.
What struck me was how the podcast really highlighted his dedication.
Right.
This wasn't just a job for him. He was actively involved in his community.
Yeah. It's easy to forget that, police officers are individuals
Right.
with lives and families and aspirations outside of their duty.
Right.
Officer McClean was engaged, planning his future.
Yeah.
And those dreams were tragically cut short.
And the fact that he was searching for a missing child that night
Right.
makes it even more heartbreaking.
Awful.
Yeah, he was trying to make a difference, not just enforcing the law,
Right.
but actively protecting the vulnerable.
It humanizes the badge.
Yeah.
Reminding us that, officers often go above and beyond.
Right.
The call of duty, putting themselves at risk for the well-being of others.
The podcast features interviews with some of Officer McClean's colleagues,
Yeah.
and they paint a picture of a man who was respected, admired, and deeply missed.
I bet.
They talk about his commitment to service, his unwavering dedication to his community.
Those personal accounts are so valuable.
Yeah.
They transform Officer McClean from just a name in a case file
Right.
into a real person, someone who left a lasting impact
Yeah.
on those who knew him.
It's a powerful reminder that every life lost to violence has this ripple effect,
Yeah.
leaving behind a void felt by families, friends, and entire communities.
Absolutely.
In this case, while focusing on the pursuit of justice for Officer McClean,
Right.
it also exposes the dark underbelly of the drug trade
Yeah.
and its corrosive impact on individuals and communities.
It's a cycle of desperation, fear, and violence that traps people in a system that seems impossible to escape.
Johnny Ray Robinson, a product of this environment, made choices driven by survival.
Right.
Choices that ultimately led to tragedy.
It raises those complex questions
Yeah.
about individual accountability versus societal responsibility.
Absolutely.
What factors contributed to Robinson's path? How much blame can we place on someone trying to navigate a system
Right.
that's designed to keep them marginalized?
It's a conversation we need to have, especially considering the broader context of 1988 Brooklyn.
Right.
This was the height of the crack epidemic,
Yeah.
a period marked by intense gang violence, strained police-community relations,
Yeah.
and systemic inequalities that fueled the cycle of crime.
Absolutely.
And Officer McClean's death becomes a microcosm of these larger societal issues,
Right.
highlighting the urgent need for solutions that address the root causes of violence
Yeah.
and create a more just and equitable society.
It's a sobering reminder
Yeah.
that these challenges haven't disappeared. They continue to plague communities across the country.
Yeah.
And they demand our attention and our commitment to finding solutions.
This deep dive into the murder of Officer Tony McClean,
Mm-hmm.
it's more than just a true crime story.
Right.
It's a call to action.
It's a call to action.
It reminds us of the human cost of violence,
Yeah.
the complexities of the justice system,
Mhm.
and the need for systemic change.
Absolutely.
It challenges us to think critically about the choices we make as individuals,
Right.
and the responsibility we all share in creating a safer and more just world.
Yeah, I think the legacy of Officer McClean and all those who've lost their lives to senseless violence can be honored by striving towards a future
Hmm.
where such tragedies are not just a tragic reality,
Yes.
but a distant memory.
That's a great point, and I think that's the most powerful takeaway from this deep dive.
Yeah.
It's not just about understanding what happened. It's about using that knowledge to spark meaningful conversations, to challenge assumptions, and to inspire positive change.
Absolutely.